It seems there are a great number of dragons that dwell within the astral plane, and that is not too surprising, for you see, out of every realm of existence, this is the only one that is physically connected to our own, or rather, the only one where there is a physical barrier that you must pass through. See, as I said before, when I was talking about the solar dragons, there are several of these bubbled realms within a single system. Now, it's actually quite hard for us to get past these bubbles. See, there are a lot of requirements that are needed to let us survive when in there. Spelljammer ships are essentially what we need to create, but they're not exactly cheap and easy to make. Dragons, however, being mighty and powerful creatures beyond belief, can sort of just fly through this bubble. Now, why they would do so can be quite interesting. Usually, they are heading to another realm altogether, but some tend to actually like the spaces between. Of course, they will change over time, and that is one of the many reasons we find quite a few types of them here. But today I wish to speak of the Lunar dragon, the last of them that I think are worth noting. So, like the others, they have a particular place that they like to dwell, and its name hints at this. They like moons, but that's a little misleading. See, they won't just dwell in moons, they will dwell in any suitable celestial body, provided they are barren, small, and uninhabited. So, yes, moons fit the criteria perfectly, but they also like smaller realms on the fringes of systems, as well as rogue ones that are sort of systemless, and be found floating within the astral sea. And they are obsessively controlling of this territory, the whole thing. They view the entirety of their celestial body as their own, and will attack anything if it even looks like it's going to get close. Most spelljammers know to keep a wide berth of a known location of a lunar dragon, but they would be disappointed if they are left alone for too long, for in short, they love little more than to hunt and kill. If they are out in wild space, they will go out of their way to attack any other creature. Their violence and power-hungry nature is very much in line with other chromatic dragons. So, in essence, you should be viewing them with the same sort of stigma that you would a chromatic dragon. That would be the smarter thing for you to do. Actually, they have a special love for destroying spelljammer ships. They might even go so far as to ignore their prey during a hunt if they see one on the horizon. Not only because they are quite cruel and like to destroy things, but mostly because they are the best way to find treasure when out in wild space, and view them as easy targets for the pickings, with many valuables on board. In fact, most go so far as to keep the ship's figureheads as mementos and trophies. Actually, talking about things they like to keep, best get to the topic of what they sort of like in their hoards. So, as I said before, the figureheads of the ships are their prized possession, and probably the only unusual thing about their hoards. They keep all sorts of normal treasures. The problem is that you really can't give them tribute of any form. They are akin to a white dragon in this regard. If they think they can just take something, and you offer it to them, they're going to view it as an insult, thinking that you think they can't kill you, but they obviously can, so they're going to attack you outright. And when it comes to the likes of food, they have a lot of similarities with solar dragons, but unlike the solar dragons, they have no real issue with eating the likes of humanoids or other intelligent beings. Again, it's easy to describe them as evil because of this, but unlike most chromatics, they don't really have dealings with anyone or commanding people under them the way that blues and greens do. It makes them a bit worse, if you ask me, as they rather exterminate things than enslave them. Oh, I should also mention that their shape and body is more in line with the dragons that our realm has. You know, the usual 4 legs and the wings, but they tend to be a little smaller than most dragons, however. Wow, they're still absolutely massive, they're a dragon after all, but you're not really going to notice this difference unless they're right next to each other, side by side. Also, their appearance, being that it almost looks like that jagged rock, would lead you to believe that they could be quite fragile. This is absolutely not the case. They are incredibly strong because, again, they are dragons. Now, as they are so solitary and xenophobic, it's actually quite rare that they ever breed, I'd almost argue that it's surprising that they even do so in the first place, because yes, even other lunar dragons are not immune to their hatred and hunting, though it's not as much as vitriolic as it is with the others. But what is known is when the females have to store up their eggs, they have large amounts of food before borderline hibernating for a long time. Then they have an absolutely massive cluster of eggs. And I would very much like to hammer this point in. They have a lot of kids when they actually get down and do so. I would say more than every other type of dragon has in one cluster. It could be all the way up to 12 per clutch. It's likely needed too, as they go out of their way to claim everything as soon as they are a wormling, and they get promptly squished for their arrogance. The ones smart enough to pick better locations, or strong enough to kill everything in their would-be lair, are the only ones that survive, and that's not going to be most of them. Now, with all that's been stated, and given their difference in location and personality, you would expect the Solar and the Lunar Dragon to have a sort of rivalry, right? Well, no, not really, not at all. They don't think about each other or even care what the other tends to do. I'm sure if they met, they would come to blows, yes, but the same thing can be said for almost every other type of dragon. They don't have a particular hatred in any way that stands outside the normal. But now I'd like to get into the abilities of the Lunar Dragon. So, as you would expect from them being so alone and in desolate places, they are more akin to the cold for many ways. So to start, their breath weapon is very much that, a cold breath attack, very akin to white dragons, but has different properties. See, it does nowhere as near harm and damage to its target, but instead freezes them in place, making them unable to move entirely, which in my tactical mind is way more useful if you weren't alone. The Lunar Dragon not utilizing it properly, if you ask me. They also have a quite bizarre ability, known as a phase. They can't do this for long, but what they do is they make themselves incorporeal for as long as they focus, making mundane and non-magical effects have less purchase on them. They will still hurt them if you run at them with a normal sword and stab them, but they would just make nowhere near as much pain as you would normally. What you need to do is get them to stop concentrating on it, then they will phase back to normal again, letting you hit them with your sword. So, time for the tale I have of a Lunar Dragon, and sadly it's not that out of the ordinary. In fact, I would almost state that it's borderline a cliché. The Spelljammer ship I was sailing with had to stop on a desolate moon in order to restock and rest for a while. Unfortunately, that moon just so happened to be the home of a Lunar Dragon. But one that did not attack. They merely roared at us from a distance to leave, just from out of sight. Half the crew wanted to do so immediately, and I completely understand why, but a lot of us, the more adventurous ones, wanted to stay and follow the source. And so that is what we did. We demanded to lurch closer and closer to the booming voice that was repeating again and again for us to leave its home. We found cracks within the moon's surface and slipped our way on through, finding the hollowed out remains of where it lived. Eventually, we made its way to its lair, to find it clutching a large amount of its eggs, and surprisingly, it was in a fast, deep slumber. There was a large purple gemstone that was guarding its hoard. That was what was actually making the sound. The gemstone, by the way, was absolutely massive and on an enormous pedestal made of gold. I don't think between the 12 of us that went down, we could have lifted it if we all worked in together. So, we thought, best not to pick a fight with the sleeping beast, and left it alone. We travelled back to our ship and left the very next day. I wish the story ended there, but unfortunately it didn't, because of the foolish actions of one of our crew, who decided he's never going to read a myth, ever, about a dragon. He saw a golden necklace among the hoard, and it was far too shiny for him to leave alone. So about 2 years later, the dragon actually awoke from protecting its eggs, and obviously knew something had been taken from its hoard, almost instantly, and went out looking for the crew that did so. The crew, however, including myself, disbanded what feels like ages ago now, so I was alone flying peacefully on my dragon's amok near my home, where I was randomly attacked by a Lunar Dragon. We defended ourselves, and after a long fight, I went out to look at why this random Lunar Dragon attacked me. It took me almost a month and a half to put all the pieces together and figure out what had happened. I still have no idea how it found where I lived, by the way. That was a little scary. They are a strange group of dragons. Very close to the ones we know, but just alien enough to get you to tilt your ear. A good first introduction into the wacky and weird world of spelljamming. Thank you for listening to my tales. I'm the Ashspawn. Feel free to leave a like, comment, or subscribe. It really does mean a lot to me. But, till next we meet, fellow traveller, have a good day.